Welcome back to the Flannel Guys. As you saw on the way in, my backyard, such as it is, backs up to a river. It's part of the reason why we bought the place. It's only about 3/4 of an acre, I think 0.72 acres, but it had this lovely view back here. This is not my dock, this is my neighbor's dock. And we got told when we moved in, especially by our next door neighbor, now Brian, you know it's gonna flood here. And we figured, sure, there's a river in the backyard. But surprisingly enough, the river hasn't been my problem. This video goes out to my buddy, the Yeoman homesteader. I'm gonna put a link to his YouTube channel. If you haven't seen it, he's doing some cool stuff. We had talked about flooding that he has on his property briefly, so I told him I would make this video. This one's dedicated to you. So it wasn't the river that was my main problem. Although when Isabel came through and the tide levels came up, it did cause some flooding, but that hasn't been the main problem. So I thought maybe the problem is the marsh. That hasn't been it either. And then I thought, maybe it's how far up into my yard the marsh goes, but that hasn't been it either. Here is one of my main issues. We are currently in the crawl space of my house, and it has what's called a sump pump. That's what's right here to my right. What a sump pump does is it sits below ground, and as the water level comes up, it kicks on automatically. This is a really good thing to have in your house, especially if you live in a tidal region like I do. But where they had it coming out was not very helpful. But anyways, let's see if it works.
Oh no,
oh no, not enough water. Rats. Well, I know it works because it's mostly out of water. All right, turn it on nice and low. Here goes. Sump pump attempt 2.0. Revenge of the sump pump. Water be gone. Yes. Yes. The anticipation is palpable. Or it's broken. Ah, ah, ah. Look at that. Water be gone. All right, you can turn it off. Oh, wait! Almost died. The things you do to get somebody to watch your stuff. Holy cow. Alright, anyways. Good. So, problem number one, sump pump. What they did was they ran it out into the middle of the yard, somewhere over there, and just had it pop up out of the ground. Problem number two is that due to government regulations, I live in a wetland protected and a wetland managed areas, which has its benefits and drawbacks. But you are not allowed to drain water toward the river. You also can't run it the other way toward the city sewers. So before those rules went into effect, my third issue popped up. All of my neighbors raised their ground level. So now my yard is the low yard. So I can't take the water to the street, and I can't take it back to the river, which is where water goes. So what do? Our property is only 50 feet wide. So what we did was we dug a rain garden. Now what is a rain garden, you might ask? Well, essentially, it's a really pretty drainage ditch. If you ever go by a Walmart or something like that, when they have this new construction, they dig this giant hole and they put a little fountain in it to keep the mosquitoes at bay and things like that. I don't have room for that. So what you see behind me is our rain garden. Now, the main difference between a drainage ditch and a rain garden is the rain garden is full of plants that like wet feet. And it's not just a ditch. Okay, what we did was we dug 14 feet long by 16 feet wide, and then you put a mix, and it was about 2 feet deep. We put a mix in there of 50% sand, 25% compost, and 25% topsoil. Because my fourth problem is that because of where we live, the ground is clay about 1.5 inches down. So our percolation tests are terrible. They do not work well at all. We dug down in the lowest part of our yard where the water was going anyways, and gave the water an actual depth that it could percolate. And then we put plants in it that like wet feet and use a lot of water. So now we're going to show you the different types of plants that we have in. While I was editing the video, it rained. So I get to show you the rain garden actually working. See the standing water? Remember I told you we put the garden in the lowest part of our yard? So you can actually see the water flowing right into the garden. And the garden itself is full of water. Now when I was under the house, I told you the sump pump was part of the problem. The sump pump bubbled straight out of the ground, right here, into no type of drainage field or anything. It just bubbled. So what we did was we turned the pipe sideways, buried a whole bunch of gravel, put a little screen on top, and planted some grass. And the gravel and everything, we dug it into a delta shape like that into the rain garden for it to hold the water. We also buried a bucket, a super secret bucket with this magic trap door, so we could see if the ground was actually taking the water below grade and not just sitting on top. Well, that's a 5-gallon bucket. And it rained for about 30 minutes, and it was not a torrential downpour. So, this giant, beautiful garden has absorbed that much water. And the plants are part of what helped make this work. And now we are totally not going to have a voiceover, and it's totally going to be my voice and my expertise in plants that tells you what these plants are. So, here we go.
Hyperion daylily, ruby spice clethra,
We don't know what this one is. It seeded itself.
Japanese iris, canna lily, cardinal flower, winterberry, swamp milkweed, California elephant ear, more swamp milkweed, juncus, more winterberry, more clethra, and lots of daylilies and calla lilies.
So we traded this space that was just puddle for this beautiful rain garden. And we occasionally have ducks that come up from the lake or the river and hang out and eat our pests. Now, in case you're wondering what we did with all the dirt, well, if you can see this little grassy knoll behind me, you can see how much higher it is now. That's all the clay that we moved out. And I tapered this into this hill. And we did it with a shovel and a wheelbarrow. We also did it last year in April during COVID. So it's been here about a year. It works really, really well. We used to have about 6 inches of water in our yard because of all of the lack of drainage, the lack of percolation. So now all the water flows in there and our backyard dries out very, very quickly. In overall cost, I think we spent about $1,000. It was, 5 or 6 yards worth of sand, and like 3 yards of topsoil and 3 yards of compost. And we bought an extra shovel and we bought a wheelbarrow. And it took about a week, and our neighbors thought we were crazy. Oh, and the grass seed, because it doesn't just do that. But we have had wonderful success with it. So, if you have any questions about it, oh, one more thing I almost forgot, very important. There is a formula to figure out how deep, wide, and all that stuff you need your rain garden to be, depending on how much land and runoff and soil you have with your perk test. I'm going to link those things in the description below so that you can peruse those at your leisure. And hopefully this helps you as you're trying to figure out your own drainage. We sacrificed basically a small part of the yard, if you consider that a sacrifice, because it's gorgeous, and really restored a lot of the rest of it into usable land. So until next time, trust for the job you want. See ya.
The government is trying to protect the wetlands, precious. The government hates us. It won't let us do what we want. The government wants what's best for you. The government doesn't care about your interests. The government just wants to protect the universe. Nobody likes you. The government doesn't have any friends.